It's one of the simplest elements in the universe, forged in the Big Bang itself, a light, silvery metal. You might know it as the powerhouse inside the battery of your phone, your laptop, or your brand new electric car. It represents the cutting edge of our technological future. But what if I told you that this very same element, lithium, might hold the key to defeating one of the most terrifying and ancient diseases known to humanity? What if this simple substance could not only halt, but actually reverse the relentless, heartbreaking memory theft of Alzheimer's disease? This isn't a pitch for a futuristic sci-fi movie. This is a story unfolding in our top research labs right now, a story that could redefine how we view both medicine and aging itself. Today, we're diving deep into that story. And to understand its profound implications, we have to first face the darkness it's trying to push back: Alzheimer's disease. For far too many, it's a diagnosis that feels like a one-way ticket to oblivion, a slow-motion erasure of the self. It's a disease that doesn't just attack the body, it dismantles the very essence of who a person is. It begins subtly, with a forgotten name or a misplaced key, but it grows into a relentless thief, stealing cherished memories, complex thoughts, precious personality traits, and the vital connections to loved ones, one irreplaceable piece at a time. It forces families to watch as the person they know and love fades away before their very eyes. For decades, the search for a meaningful treatment has been a long, frustrating, and incredibly expensive road, littered with the wreckage of hundreds of failed clinical trials and billions of dollars in dashed hopes. While we've recently seen the first glimmers of real progress with new anti-amyloid treatments, they are just the first light of dawn after a very long night. They can slow the decline, but they are not a cure. The war is far from over. But now, a completely different and, frankly, astonishingly simple contender has entered the ring, and that contender is lithium. Yes, just the element, atomic number 3 on the periodic table. For those who know their medical history, lithium might ring a bell, but probably not in this context. It was approved all the way back in 1970 in the United States as a frontline treatment for bipolar disorder. For generations of doctors and medical students, it was presented as a true medical mystery. It worked, often with life-changing effectiveness, but for the longest time, no one was quite sure how. It was this strange and fascinating outlier in the modern pharmacopoeia. It wasn't a complex molecule painstakingly designed in a lab over years of molecular engineering. It was a simple salt. A fundamental piece of the earth that, when ingested in carefully controlled doses, could soothe the most turbulent of minds. It was effective, it had a certain mystique, but it was largely confined to the world of psychiatry, a specialist tool for a specific job. So how did this psychiatric workhorse find itself at the very center of cutting-edge neurology and Alzheimer's research? The story is a perfect example of scientific detective work. It began, as many great discoveries do, with a quiet observation, a pattern hiding in plain sight. Researchers and astute clinicians started noticing something peculiar in their long-term patient data. Patients who had been taking lithium for years or even decades to manage bipolar disorder seemed to have a surprisingly and statistically significant lower risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's disease in their later years. Was it just a coincidence? Or was the lithium providing some kind of protective effect? It was a statistical ghost, a faint but persistent signal in the noise. Then another, even stranger clue surfaced. Epidemiologists, the detectives who study disease patterns in populations, looked at public health data on a massive scale. They found that entire communities with naturally higher levels of lithium in their public drinking water also appeared to have this same invisible shield, a lower incidence of the disease. Now, let's be crystal clear. This kind of observational data is never definitive proof. It's a correlation, not necessarily causation. There could be a dozen other confounding factors, but it was far too compelling, far too tantalizing to simply ignore. It was a breadcrumb trail laid out by nature, and the world of science decided it was time to follow it. And this is where the story pivots from a hopeful mystery to a gripping thriller. As the full power of modern neuroscience was focused on this lithium connection, a devastating picture began to emerge. Scientists discovered that patients in the very early stages of Alzheimer's, those with what's called minimal cognitive impairment, often had significantly lower than normal levels of active lithium in their brains. The question was why? The answer was chilling and revealed a core, wicked feature of the disease. It turns out that the amyloid plaques, those infamous, sticky, toxic clumps of protein that are the primary physical hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, are not just passive debris. They are active villains in this biological drama. It was discovered that these plaques have a chemical affinity for lithium. They act like sponges, binding to and trapping lithium ions, effectively hoarding the element and starving the surrounding brain cells of this potentially crucial protector. This creates a horrifying and diabolical vicious cycle. The progression of Alzheimer's leads to the formation of more amyloid plaques. More plaques mean more lithium gets trapped and taken out of circulation. And, in a final cruel twist, the resulting lower levels of available lithium appear to contribute to the formation of even more plaques. The disease literally fuels its own progression by hijacking one of the brain's own potential defense mechanisms. It's a biochemical trap, a self-reinforcing downward spiral that accelerates the patient's cognitive decline. For years, this vicious cycle seemed like an unbreakable lock on the brain. This new understanding explained why earlier studies using standard forms of lithium on animal models of dementia had shown such mixed and often disappointing results. You could be pouring lithium into the system, but the plaques were just soaking it all up before it could do any good. But what if they were using the wrong key for the lock? This new model of amyloid lithium sequestration suggested a brilliant new strategy. What if you could design a form of lithium that the plaques couldn't get their sticky fingers on? A form that could act like a stealth vehicle, sneaking past these protein hoarders and delivering its payload directly to the brain cells where it was needed most. Enter lithium orotate. This specific formulation of the element appears to be resistant to being sequestered by amyloid. And this brings us to the groundbreaking new study that has the medical world holding its breath. Researchers took a standard mouse model of Alzheimer's. These are mice that are genetically engineered to develop all the classic signs of the disease, the plaques, the tangles, and the corresponding memory loss, and they gave them lithium orotate. The results that were published were nothing short of stunning. The treatment didn't just slow down the disease. It didn't just halt the progression of memory loss in its tracks. In these mice, it appeared to reverse it. The mice regained lost cognitive function on memory and learning tests. And when the researchers examined their brains, they observed anatomical changes, suggesting a genuine reversal of the disease's physical, destructive footprint. This is a monumental claim. It weaves together all the different threads, the observational data, the biochemical mechanisms, the vicious cycle theory, into a single, coherent narrative of profound hope. It suggests a potential pathway not just to manage Alzheimer's, but to defeat it. And if you believe that this kind of scientific pursuit, this relentless chase for answers, deserves the spotlight, take just a second to hit that like button below. It's a small click for you, but it sends a powerful message that you want more stories of potential breakthroughs like this one. But, and you knew there was a but coming, because in science, there always is. Let's take a deep breath and moderate our optimism. As any seasoned medical researcher, doctor, or patient advocate will tell you, we have been standing in this exact spot many, many times before. The long, sad history of Alzheimer's research is paved with brilliantly promising theories and incredibly exciting mouse studies that ultimately failed, sometimes spectacularly, in human clinical trials. The graveyard of abandoned Alzheimer's drugs is vast. The biology of a lab mouse, however well engineered, is not the infinitely more complex biology of a human being. What works in a controlled lab environment often doesn't translate to the messy reality of human life. So here we are again, standing at a familiar and tantalizing crossroads, armed with what is admittedly a particularly elegant and compelling story. Past failures don't guarantee future ones, of course, and this narrative about the lithium cycle is one of the most robust and logical we've seen in a long time. But the ultimate proof, the only proof that truly matters, is still missing. The next step is as clear as it is critical. We must take this out of the lab and into the clinic. We need rigorous, large-scale, placebo-controlled, double-blind human clinical trials. These are the gold standard of medicine, the only way to know for sure if this works in people. The good news is these are already in the works. And there's another huge, almost unprecedented advantage here. Lithium is not some brand new, untested chemical emerging from a secretive lab. It's a treatment that has been used safely and effectively for over half a century. We have accumulated a vast library of data on its safety profile, its potential side effects, and how to manage its dosage to maximize benefits while minimizing risks. This gives it a massive head start and de-risks the process significantly compared to a completely novel drug. The collective hope of millions, the prayer of researchers and families alike, is that over the next 5 to 6 years, these clinical trials will be completed and will finally prove that lithium orotate is the effective, accessible, and powerful disease-modifying treatment we've all been waiting for. And there's one more piece of absolutely wonderful news. As a treatment, lithium is, for all intents and purposes, dirt cheap. The element itself is abundant across the globe, and the process of turning it into a medical-grade salt is simple and inexpensive. Crucially, as a naturally occurring element, it cannot be patented. And this, paradoxically, is where the wonderful news suddenly becomes a massive, almost insurmountable problem. The world of pharmaceutical development, the engine that brings new medicines to the public, runs on investment, and that investment runs on the promise of profit. A pharmaceutical company might spend hundreds of millions, or in some cases even billions of dollars, to conduct the massive, multi-year clinical trials necessary to get a drug approved by regulators like the FDA. They make this enormous financial bet with the expectation of getting that money back and then some through a period of market exclusivity granted by a patent. But with lithium, there's no patent to be filed. There's no exclusivity to be won. There is almost no significant profit to be made. Why would a publicly traded company responsible to its shareholders invest a fortune in proving that a cheap, generic salt works only to see dozens of other companies start selling it for pennies the very next day? This is a classic and brutal market failure. It's a phenomenon known in the industry as the Valley of Death for medical research, a place where incredibly promising and potentially life-saving treatments can wither on the vine simply because they are not commercially profitable. And this is precisely why we, as a society, created institutions for publicly funded medical research. Organizations like the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, in the United States exist for this very reason, to fund the vital research that the private sector wants or can't touch. Their mission is to investigate treatments that serve the public good, not a corporate bottom line. The potential of lithium for Alzheimer's is a textbook case, a poster child for why the NIH is so absolutely essential to our health and future. But that very lifeline, that engine of public good, is itself fragile and perpetually under threat. The author of the piece we're discussing points out a painful and alarming reality: political attacks on this funding structure. He notes that the previous administration under President Donald Trump had canceled more than 1,800 NIH grants, a move he describes as probably illegal, which in the meantime created chaos and dramatically decreased research funding across the board. The administration's proposed budget included a staggering 40% cut to the NIH, an eye-watering slash of $18 billion. Just take a moment to imagine how many potential cures, how many lithium-style breakthroughs are contained within $18 billion of lost research. Thankfully, the Senate at the time rejected this and has since worked to restore and even slightly increase the funding. But the battle is never truly over. The future of research, like the lithium trials, depends on these yearly budget fights, on the political will to see science as a critical investment in our collective future, not just another line item to be cut. So this is where we stand. We have an ancient, simple element forged in the stars. We have a devastating modern disease that, in a cruel twist of biology, creates a vicious cycle by stealing that very element from the brain. We have a potential key, a special form called lithium orotate that could break that cycle and has shown the stunning ability to actually reverse the disease in animals. We have a clear path forward through human trials, a path made safer by decades of prior experience with the drug. But that path is threatened, not by a lack of scientific ideas, but by a lack of will to fund ideas that don't promise blockbuster profits. The fate of what could be one of the cheapest, most effective, and most accessible cures for a global health crisis hangs in the balance, caught in a tug-of-war between profound scientific hope and cold, hard political and economic reality. What happens next will be determined in the quiet of laboratories and in the noisy halls of government. To make sure you don't miss the next chapter in this incredible, unfolding story, and to keep up with the science that is shaping our world, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell. The answer to one of medicine's greatest and most painful questions could be just around the corner. And you will want to be the first